Investing in a property as a short-term rental is a great idea for a lot of reasons. Maybe you want a place to vacation in Charleston from time to time but offset the expenses. Maybe you want to live here full-time in the off-season, or just make a lot of money by providing a stay for tourists. I am all about it, but the City of Charleston says not so fast. Charleston has become very strict when it comes to short-term rental rules in the area. So let's dive into it. Hi, I'm Katarina West, a local realtor serving the greater Charleston area. I get a lot of people asking me about short-term rental investments, so I wanted to make this video to provide some insight into the Charleston short-term rental rules. In recent years, the rise of short-term rentals through platforms like Airbnb and VRBO has led to increased scrutiny and regulation in many cities across the United States, and Charleston is no exception. The city enacted new rules in 2018 that they say are designed to balance the needs of homeowners who want to earn extra income with the concerns of residents who want to maintain the character of their neighborhoods. However, I think the hotel industry lobbying to keep the share of tourism money plays a major role here. But anyway, these regulations apply to all short-term rentals within the city limits, including entire homes, apartments, and rooms rented out by homeowners. And to clarify further, short-term is considered anything under 30 days. Please keep in mind that the rules are subject to change, and I do not work for the city zoning department, so while I will try my best to explain the nuances thoroughly, it is a complex matter and I recommend calling yourself or reading the ordinances yourself. Please do your own due diligence to make sure you can do what you want with the given property. Also, keep in mind that even if the city would allow short-term rentals within a neighborhood, an HOA may have restrictions on lease lengths. For example, most condos do not allow rentals for a length of under 6 months or a year. Now for Charleston rules, I'm going to the website charleston-sc.gov/short-term rentals. Here is where all of the information is located on the ordinances. One of the key requirements of Charleston short-term rental regulations is that homeowners must obtain a permit from the city in order to rent out their property. The permit process involves several steps, including an application fee, inspections, and a review of the property's compliance with safety and zoning regulations. So, Charleston short-term rentals are divided into 4 categories. In all of these categories, there's a zoning and application review fee, fire inspection and plan review, business license fee, and there's an accommodation tax. So let's look into these categories further. Category 1 is the area of the peninsula in the Old and Historic District. Category 2 is most of the rest of the peninsula of Charleston, excluding the Old and Historic District and excluding the short-term rental overlay. Category 3 is all areas of the city off of the peninsula, such as Daniel Island, James Island, Johns Island, and West Ashley. Lastly, there's the short-term rental overlay downtown. This is where units are eligible for either a bed and breakfast permit or a commercial short-term rental permit, depending on the zoning of the property. New listings in this district are very rare, but when they do come up, they're millions of dollars. So other than this short-term rental overlay zone, all of the other categories must meet the general requirements for a residential short-term rental permit. So what do you have to do to get that? Most importantly, to qualify for legal short-term renting, the property must be the owner's full-time primary residence, and they verify this by receiving the county's 4% legal residence tax exemption for owner-occupied property. I've talked about this in my other videos, but this is the application where you prove to the county that it is your primary residence through your tax returns, your vehicle registration, license, and more. So basically, any investment property cannot be a short-term rental except for that commercially zoned property in the short-term rental overlay. There are also other regulations for each of the categories. In Category 1, the property must also be listed on the National Register of Historic Places to be eligible. Category 2 doesn't seem to have any additional requirements. In Category 3, in these areas, the same thing holds true where it has to be an owner's primary residence. So, if you have a duplex in West Ashley, you would theoretically be allowed to have a short-term rental if you live in the main unit and rent out an ADU, for example, or if you just rent out a room of your home. But you wouldn't be able to rent out both sides of a duplex if it wasn't your primary residence. So how do they enforce these rules? You've probably seen some of the illegally operating Airbnbs online. But let me tell you, it's not worth the risk. As of 2016, the city literally created a task force just to enforce these short-term rental rules. So there's a whole team of people searching through sites to make sure people aren't illegally operating short-term rentals. If you do operate an illegal short-term rental, it can have some serious financial consequences. The residency requirement states that the record owner of the property must physically reside at the subject property at least 183 days each year, and has the subject property as their legal voting address and the address of their driver's license. It says a violation of this chapter is a misdemeanor punishable by a fine and/or incarceration. And each day there is an unlawful violation under this chapter, they consider it a separate offense. In addition to a lot of these rules, there are parking rules too. So each short-term rental must provide one off-street parking space on the subject property, in addition to a required off-street parking for the existing uses of the property. So there at least has to be a parking space for you, the owner, and one for the renter. For the sake of not boring you by reading a 20-page document on these ordinances, I recommend that you go to the Charleston website yourself if you want to make sure you have all the rules, because I'm just skimming the surface. For some more regulation details, up to 4 adults, regardless of relationship, are allowed to stay overnight in a short-term rental. It can be a duplex or carriage house as long as the property meets the eligibility criteria. You're probably wondering, does the host have to be readily available? Well, the rule says a host does not have to be present for the complete duration of the guest's stay, but the host must be generally available. Business licenses expire every year in December, and so they do need to be renewed annually. In addition, short-term rental operators must collect accommodations tax. Even if you hire a property manager, the property owner is responsible for collecting these taxes from the renters. There are substantial penalties for failing to collect these, and the state law allows a civil penalty of not less than $500 or more than $2,000 for each 7 days the property was rented. If these rules make investing in the City of Charleston impossible for you since you aren't able to live here as your primary residence or pay the millions of dollars required for the rare commercially zoned properties, let's look into the surrounding areas. The beach areas used to be the best places to turn to, but even that is changing as Folly Beach just voted on a cap of short-term rentals to 800 permits. There are currently 1,200 permits, so new permits won't be handed out for a while as this number dwindles. Sullivan's Island hasn't allowed short-term rentals for decades, other than a few properties that were grandfathered in, and the local residents recently also voted against allowing timeshares on the island. Isle of Palms, however, does still allow short-term rentals, and many people find Wild Dunes, the resort community on Isle of Palms, to be a great option for investments, as there are condos and single-family homes on the beach or a few rows back that allow short-term rentals. For some of the other areas, Mount Pleasant also has a cap on the number of short-term rental permits. The areas that aren't incorporated into the City of Charleston, like areas of West Ashley and James Island, technically could allow short-term rentals, but it's a bit of a gray area, so I wouldn't want to promise anything either way. Somerville also recently enacted new rules on short-term rentals, requiring property owners to reside in the property for at least 183 days of the year. A lot of people have turned to North Charleston as the new place to get a short-term rental property, as not only is it lower in sale prices on average compared to downtown, but the rules are the least strict for now. Another great option if the short-term rental rules don't work for you is to invest in a mid-term rental. These are considered anything from 1 to 12 months, so you could do month to month or even 6 months. A lot of investors aim for a 90-day stay. Midterm rentals are a great option here in Charleston because we have strong demand for temporary housing. Some of the midterm market demand includes traveling nurses with Roper and MUSC hospitals, long-term vacationers, people relocating here who need temporary housing while they build or search for a house, and more. It's a happy medium between short and long-term investing, without the same rules of the short-term ordinance. Despite all of these super strict rules against short-term rentals, there is hope. A bill was recently proposed into the State House of South Carolina that would make it illegal for local governments to ban short-term rentals fewer than 29 days. The bill would override any existing bans on short-term rentals in cities and towns throughout the state, like Charleston, and would allow homeowners to rent out their properties for short-term stays without fear of legal repercussions. Part of the reason this bill is so important is that short-term rentals have a $4.2 billion impact on South Carolina's economy each year, generating nearly $2 billion in revenue for property owners annually, according to a study by economist Dr. Joey Von Nessen. With home affordability on the decline, people having the option to create some sort of income on their property is more important than ever. There are mixed reactions to this bill, as some are worried about the impact of short-term rentals on their neighborhoods, and others support the right of homeowners to earn income through their properties. We will see what happens in the state legislature. What I always tell my clients and prospects is that if you find a property that you plan on renting out short-term, Make sure the numbers work for a long-term rental just in case. There are a number of factors that could affect the viability of a short-term rental, such as the regulations changing, the HOA rules changing, the short-term rental market becoming saturated or softening due to unforeseen circumstances, like a global pandemic perhaps, and more. I hope you found this video helpful, and I do not mean to scare anyone off of investing in short-term rentals here. I just want you to have all the facts before you make a major investment decision, as you don't want to be dealing with the fines of breaking the permitting rules here in Charleston. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts below on the short-term rental rules. What do you think is best for Charleston?